And now I'm going to do a little disclaimer, guys. I'm not a professional interviewer. I do have a radio show and I do interview people on it, but I do that in the security of my own home with a script in front of me and not a live audience. So I hope you don't mind if I read from a script and as we have this chat. I'm hoping it'll be a little bit more organic than that, but I will be referring to my notes every now and then. So, as most of you know, this is the lovely Dianne Sangster. Some of you will know her as Diane Preston. She has written this wonderful book called Flutter. Now, you have a great tagline for your book. Do you want to tell that to the audience?
Yes, I had to learn the tagline. It took a long time to work it out. It is, young Aussie teacher falls for single dad in London, secret gambler.
And that's the most important thing, secret gambler.
Yes.
And that is a weight that the book comes to bear, and we, learn more about it. We learn about just how much gambling affects people, not just the gamblers themselves, but their family and friends and their communities. And but there is hope and redemption. So it's a great message. Now, it's telling the story of addiction, struggle, recovery, and a survivor's philosophy. And there is a lot of survivor's philosophy in this book. It's a true story based on your husband's struggle with gambling. Now, we know there's many different kinds of addictions, but in this case, we're going to focus on gambling. And you talk about his recovery through the group Gamblers Anonymous, also known as GA. But they also helped you through their subsidiary branch, which is Gam-Anon. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. Mm-hmm.
Which basically is solely for friends and family of gamblers themselves.
Yes.
And they separate the two groups. So the gamblers go to one room and they talk with experienced gamblers and, try and heal one another. And then the family and friends go to a separate room. And in each of these rooms, these stories are sort of kept separate and private. And these are, different personal journeys, but all for the same aim, which is healing, recovery.
The first aim is to stop.
Right, of course.
What you're doing. It's absolute stoppage, if you can.
Yeah, of course, that's the most important part. Now, you've had a successful book launch at the wonderful Hunting Raven Books on Sheep Street here in Frome, and we've got Tina at the back there. Hi, Tina. She's got some books for sale if anybody wants to get a copy later. You had standing room only at your book launch.
Yes, isn't that lovely?
It was wonderful.
Well, there weren't any seats, to be fair.
Dianne, don't give away the secrets of the trade. It was standing room only.
A few seats.
But it was a full house, and you read to us from the book, and people asked questions, and your wonderful sons came out and showed their support, so that was wonderful. So you had family there, which must have been a very special moment for you. And you're also quite the star, because you've been featured in print as well. You've been featured in the Frome Times, of course. Local paper would have to cover your story. But also, you've had a 2-page spread in a major Australian newspaper.
Isn't that lucky?
Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
Well, I was in Australia for just before I was publishing the book, and I was trying to get connections there. I wanted to arrange a publisher so that it was available in Australia as well, and the Americas.
And for those who don't know, Dianne is originally from Australia.
Yes, I was visiting family, and I thought it's worth trying to contact local journalists, let them know that I'm here, and bookshops. And so my sister suggested Caroline Overington from the Australian, so she actually responded immediately, which is amazing.
That is amazing.
But partly it was because my niece, my very forthright niece, had said, "Well, what do you want her to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to write? What does she want her to do? And do you want to read the book?" And I said, "Well, yes, that would be nice." And anyway, so she made me write from a rather wimpy letter. This is for anybody who wants to contact journalists. A rather more confident-sounding, like enlisting help. Do you want to help me address this problem which causes these terrible harms and so on? And she responded, which was wonderful. And then after I'd come back in July, it's a full page in the Weekend Australian. So
that's amazing. That is really amazing. Quite the achievement. Well done.
Yes, thank you.
And it's very exciting. What prompted you to write the book?
Well, it wasn't exactly straightforward.
No, I can't imagine it would be. No.
No, I think it started in grief because my husband died some time ago, and at the time I belonged to a writers' group in Fulham called Women's Inc. And at Women's Inc. we're one of the writing groups. There's all sorts of writing groups in Frome. They're wonderful. We have one which is more like a reviewing each other's group. This is one where you have more like Alison's class, wonderful class in Vallis, in Great Elm, where you have a prompt and write on the spot sometimes and then develop that. But
So they encourage you to write your personal stories?
yes, and because I suppose it just came out because my husband had died, and so I really started writing the end of the book first, I suppose.
Which isn't that unusual. Writers do take unusual steps to
Yes.
create their stories and tell their journey.
Yeah.
But obviously you wanted to get, this book out of you. But you have written another book before, and I want to quickly briefly mention that. You did a beautiful book of poetry, and it was accompanied by the absolutely beautiful illustrations of David Daniels. Am I getting that
Yes,
name right?
yes.
Absolutely wonderful. Were any of the poems in the book related to any of your journeys in this book?
There is one in here. There's one that's in here. Yes, the feathers. The first one in
That's
Feathers
right,
in
Feathers
My
in
Path.
Your Path. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and that's quite a poignant story
Yes.
behind that. Do you want to explain that to us?
Well, actually, Johnny, who's in my writing group, had said in mistake something about, he was trying to say weather forecast, but he said for some reason feather forecast. And it reminded me of something that a friend had said when Tony was very ill, and something about guardian angels and feathers and so I found that comforting, and so I wrote a little poem about that.
I wonder if you could maybe read your prologue of the book to us, because I think feathers come into it. Am I right?
Yes,
beginning
but
part?
they have wings. They're
Wings.
Okay.
Well, they're feathers.
Well,
attached to it.
I should explain that the prologue is really it's kind of in the middle of the story, and it may be helpful to set the scene, but anyway, I hope so.
Well, go ahead and set the scene.
Okay. Chiswick, 2003. Can you hear me all right, by the way? I don't know how this works. Yeah? Okay. Did you say it's a bit quiet? Is this better if I sit a bit closer? Hang on, I'll sit closer.
And there's a microphone there, if that's helpful.
That's the microphone, okay. I've called this one The Wings of a Pelican. This is what I wanted to call the book in the first place, but I was persuaded by some very intelligent person to call it Flutter, because it has many connotations to do with gambling and has something to do with wings as well. Anyway, this is me. Oh, I have to explain also, a little bit I put in here, Tony died some time ago. I have recreated his voice so that he can tell his own story. Names are changed to protect people's privacy. And this is me speaking here. I had to hunt for the wings. Couldn't remember where I'd stashed them. Our niece Rebecca wanted to photograph them for her Christmas card that year. The photos were fab, like her Uncle Tony's. Part of our larger bedroom was my studio space, so I eventually looked under the bed, where they were, firmly wedged. I grasped their broom handle ends and wiggled. They slid out unscathed, except the black paint on the big cardboard feathers was grey. I've never been an enthusiastic duster. I phoned her. Hi, Becca. I found the pelican wings. Do you fancy coming over this weekend? Yep, we can play around with images on the green. Great idea. Tony might even bake us some bread. Our home was in Bedford Park, a second-floor mansion flat with acres of carpet and light, rented from a friend living in New Zealand. It was our grandest temporary dwelling so far. Rebecca's eagle eye must have been honed partly from closely observing Tony's photographs. Above the mantelpiece in our living room was his large canvas close-up of the broken hinge of a playground gate bound together with blue rope. Nearby was the smaller image of a pure white hellebore with glass bubbles of dew glowing from a bed of dark leaves. Taking up one whole wall in our kitchen was a montage of the skeleton of Brighton's West Pier as it rusts away into the sea. As Tony opened the oven door on the day of Rebecca's visit, we were blasted by a rush of hot-baked bread and rosemary. He dragged out a tin of puff gold, focaccia. flecked with sea salt and chopped rosemary, drenched with olive oil. I found his version of the traditional Ligurian bread even more delicious than any we tried on the Italian Riviera. My mouth was watering. I offered to do a quality check. He grinned. "Still too hot. Let's wait till we're back from the park." I'd watch him leaning over the worktop, totally absorbed, flour everywhere, rocking with the rhythm of kneading the dough with his fists. In his usual single-minded way, he taught himself to be a fantastic baker. Loads of research and endless trial and error. No giving up till it was perfect. He was considering starting a Saturday morning class in our expansive kitchen to teach others to bake his foolproof multi-bread. His passions for baking and photography were about the only things that could lure him away from the computer and the phone. With his friend and business partner Bob, he ran a computer software company, but was semi-retired and often worked from home. Whenever I got home from work at the community centre, I heard snatches of conversation on my way upstairs, which could be work-related, but were often from some brave soul taking the first step to stop his out-of-control gambling habit. Tony had been there himself, and for years had been a mentor for those struggling with addiction. This snippet was in response to a call for help. "Don't worry, we've all done terrible things. You'll find everyone's in the same boat." When I hugged him, he turned round, adjusted his headphones to give me a quick kiss and a grin, then turned back to the screen to carry on talking and talking. I got into art college as a mature student. I'm sorry, there's only another... Is this too long? Shall I stop?
It's fine.
I got into art college as a mature student with some expertise in making life sculptures from clay. At college, I enjoyed playing around with wire and papier-mâché. For a postgraduate exhibition on identity, I made a larger-than-life skeleton of a pelican woman with humanish breasts and arms modelled on mine and called her Rara Avis. Her ochre legs were thick as an elephant's, ending in great flat feet to ground her. She was a version of me as a mother, wife, and Aussie expat. I'd always loved the big black and white pelicans in Queensland with their awkward shopping bag bills. And I found a tale from the medieval bestiary in which a mother pelican becomes furiously impatient with her demanding chicks and kills them. By accident, one hopes, but is immediately remorseful, tearing at her breast, drawing blood to revive them, reminding me of times I had lost patience with my chicks, with less tragic results, usually ending in my apology. All that remained of Rara Avis were the wings, as after the show I left her in the garden to disintegrate in the rain. But one very wet day I had second thoughts and scurried to save her detachable wings. Becca turned up. After exchanging hugs, we set off for the park with camera and wings, happy to have the focaccia to come back to. The green was just over the road, edging Bedford Park, the first garden suburb in London. The triangle of Acton Green is bordered by generous old chestnuts and crisscrossed with paths, separated from Chiswick Common by the elevated district line. Trains rattle above commuters on their way to and from Turnham Green Station. Beach brown leaves were scattered over the grass. A tang of loam was in the air. Our shadows were long. Gazing at the naked branches of a chestnut tracing dark lines over the gold of the lowering sun, I was minded of church windows. Tony and I started mucking about with the wings, much to the amusement of passers-by. "Auntie Di, can you hold the wings behind, Uncle?" Becca suggested. I gripped their wooden ends and hid from the camera, lining up the wings behind his outstretched arms. Tony tried to look angelic as Becca snapped away. He resembled Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man with wings. My arms started feeling the weight of them, so I put them down. Then impetuously I embraced Tony from behind, like one of those koala clips beloved of tourists leaving Brisbane Airport, and snuggled into the familiar jumper-clad warmth of him. He held my arms close and murmured over his shoulder, "I love you." Sorry, I've read this 1,000 times. I love you, Dianne Elizabeth Sangster. Becca was using black and white film. She leaned the wings on a wooden bench with a gap in the middle, as if their owner had momentarily slipped away. With a scattering of leaves on the grass and the path leading out of the frame, the monochrome image had a quiet poignancy. She later decided on that photograph for her card. She had also asked Tony to sit on the bench between the wings to take a few shots like that. In one resulting photo, he sits forward, relaxed. His hands dangle over the edge of the seat between his spread knees. One stout walking boot rests forward at an angle, the others tucked under the bench. The white wings extending away from his black sweater appear as part of him. He has a fashionably short beard. His face gazes away from the camera and his glasses catch the sun. An ageing, balding, strong-looking man, uncharacteristically not smiling, yet somehow loving, our slightly wounded pelican angel. 4 years later, we produced that photo at his funeral.
It's very moving. I see it affected you when you read it.
I don't know why. I've read it 1,000 times.
Well, because it's bringing back memories and grief, and it's just a beautiful, moving passage. And the pelican wings, as you say, do come into play later.
Yes.
I've seen the photograph of Tony with the wings behind him. And it's a beautiful photograph and a lovely memory for you to have.
Thank you. Yes, I love it. It is lovely.
When you opened the book and you read on the side there that you wanted to use Tony's voice as well, you used you employed a dual narrative, basically,
yes,
which is telling your story through two distinct perspectives. So that's yours and Tony's. Now, I found that this technique provides a deeper insight. It reveals hidden motivations. It contrasts your views and experiences of the same events. But why did you choose to use the dual narrative for this book?
Oh, because I thought it would sound, it was after some time of edits and changes. My first readers helped me put it into 3 parts so that it's sort of consecutively sequenced like that. But I just thought it would, and then I changed our names. I thought, I can't use our names. I have to change it. I think
so tell me
Alex.
about that. Why did you change the names?
Well, because this is a book about gambling harms. Tony became very badly behaved as a compulsive gambler, and people. I wouldn't have written this if I was still in Gamanon. I mean, I'm still kind of part of it, but while Tony was alive, I don't think I would have written it because I've actually quoted, I didn't quote, I've sort of got various sayings that people might have said in GA and Gamanon, and I've even written a whole spiel of a couple of people with permission. But it's because it's for privacy, really.
Right.
Privacy, and there's family, there's my 2 sons and the 3 daughters of Tony's and his brothers and everybody else, So it's...
And you chose to go with Dianne Sangster because is that your maiden name?
It's my maiden name, yes.
Now,
I thought it'd sound more authentic if Tony told his own story, basically. And I found that when I started writing it, that it came out more easily like that. And
how did you know how to tell Tony's story?
Because I had because he kept lots of notes. He was very involved in Gamblers Anonymous, and he'd written some pamphlets about various things. In fact, is Seamus still here? He's not.
No, Seamus has to go. Yeah.
One of them is about how digesting the help from Gamblers Anonymous, which is based on similar to AA, and all the self-help programs, the same sort of thing. I forgot what I was saying.
Well, you were talking about, I was asking about how you chose to use Tony's voice, and you were saying that you used pamphlets that he wrote.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
I believe he also used diaries.
Yes, and diaries too. And of course, what I remembered from his voice. And he liked to talk. And he didn't mind telling his story. See, Tony would be perfectly happy to tell everybody, totally openly, after he went to GA, what he'd done and how it worked. And people were usually fascinated.
Yeah, and of course they say journaling is a very healthy process, especially if you use it as a way to heal. Well, I'm glad that he did that because now we get to hear his voice through his writing, basically. I mean, it's your interpretation, and I understand you fictionalize certain aspects of the book, partly because you don't always remember things.
Don't remember conversations, no.
Yeah, so that by necessity, you have to fictionalize that. And that's understandable. But having
creative non-fiction.
Exactly. But having his diaries and his notes and the pamphlets, of course, would have helped, as well as your own memories. And again, excuse me for reading from the notes, but both casinos and gambling authorities use the term responsible gambling. But for a gambling addict, there's no such thing as responsible gambling. Responsible doesn't come into it. It's an addiction, and responsibility is left far behind. This is a concept which non-gamblers find hard to grasp. They often apportion blame and shame, and for families and loved ones of addicted gamblers, they can't understand why somebody they love and respect would hurt them in this way. Now, you write about this in Flutter quite extensively. How did you come to terms with the fact that Tony's addiction wasn't about hurting anyone, but was something much more complicated?
Well, I think the hurting people was just incidental, really. He wasn't deliberately hurting anyone. He was simply obsessed and in love with Lady Luck, if you like. But I think that helped when I didn't come to terms with it until we got help and he stopped gambling, and I was able to discuss because when you go to a self-help fellowship, which is free, by the way, if anybody has an addiction problem, it is free. You don't have to wait for treatment. You can go immediately and get some help.
This is so Gam-Anon not only is free,
Gam-Anon,
but
yes.
the help is pretty
Yes,
much immediate.
Same with Al-Anon and Narcotics Anonymous and so on. And there are about 16 self-help groups like that now, fellowships. Yes, it's not so much the money in the end, although the money is extremely difficult. People are impoverished by it. In the end, it's the lies. It's having somebody lie to you very convincingly. Very convincingly. Because they're so desperate. Because I was trying to explain to somebody recently the difference between, say, a drug addict or an alcoholic and a gambler, because there's no visible sign, is there? You don't see the visible signs.
They're not swaying, they're not slurring their speech.
And there's no after. But this, and it's actually more instant, because you just have, all you need these days is your phone, and you probably have your credit card on your phone.
Yep.
So you've got the money, you've got the resources, you can do it immediately. You don't have to go and buy the drug or the alcohol or obtain it from somewhere. You just start straight away.
And it's legal.
Yes, and young people get into terrible trouble these days very quickly. In fact, so much so that there is even a campaigning group called Gambling with Lives, which is made up of bereaved families whose compulsive gambling sons or daughters have got into so much trouble so quickly they couldn't face the repercussions and kill themselves.
And these are often teenagers.
Yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
So I remember an experience that I had not so long ago. I was outside the co-op up in Badix, and this woman came out of the co-op, and she was really shabbily dressed. She clearly was not somebody who had a lot of money, and she had a wad of scratch cards in her hand, and she couldn't even wait to get home to start scratching. She went over to the bin, laid them on top of the bin, and started furiously scratching, one after the other, till her nail was blackened by the paint that they put on the scratch cards. And I'm watching her. Her shoes were worn down. The soles were so worn down, because this is clearly somebody who is not well off. And there was probably about 30 or 40 quid's worth of scratch cards. And she's doing this. And, of course, none of them were winners. She puts them one after the other into the bin. And then she walked straight back into the co-op and bought some more.
Yes.
And that's gambling.
She's hooked, isn't she?
She was
She's
hooked.
Yeah.
Even though she clearly had want, she clearly had need, but this had drawn her in so much. And this is where I want you to read Tony at the Casino, because it sort of helps to explain the lure of casinos and gambling.
Right. I set this up so that this is supposed to be Tony talking. I won't attempt to speak like Tony. I haven't got any sons here. They could have done it maybe. But he was talking to a friend in a train, and then so he says after the meeting, we're going to a meeting. Walking back to the station after our meeting that evening, I remembered that visit as if it were yesterday. I'd never set foot in a casino before. It was the epitome of glamour. Women were dressed up to the nines, their jewellery glittering under the chandeliers. Waiters were attentive and the food delicious. It was fabulous. Over dinner, my client talked about roulette, an obvious enthusiast, going into detail about how it worked. He asked if I fancied a flutter. I found the numbers and percentages enticing, so I paid for a pile of plastic chips. sat at the green baize table with the croupier, and tentatively placed a few chips on the numbered grid in front of me. As soon as he set the wheel spinning and the ball started clicking and clacking around, my gut began to churn. Excitement needled all the way up to my scalp. I was on high alert. The wheel slowed, the ball clattered and fell. Good God, were those my numbers? Yes. The croupier pushed over my winning pile of chips. He sorted out winners and losers, and next time I placed my markers with more confidence. The wheel spun and slowed. I held my breath. But again, I won. Roulette. I was in love. Maybe I could sort out my money worries. I'd come home. I never wanted to leave. And I go on a bit about gambling.
But it does show, you talked about the ladies beautifully dressed, and, we've all watched James Bond films where he spends time in the casino and everything's so darn glamorous. But of course, what we aren't thinking is that at these tables, people are losing their livelihood. They're losing vast sums of money. And of course, gambling isn't just casinos. We don't think of it this way, but lottery tickets and bingo and, those, like you say, those online gambling programs, it can hook anyone in any way. And
dogs and horses?
Dogs and horses, exactly. I mean, you can gamble on anything. Now, you write some difficult passages about Tony's behaviour whilst in the fervent grip of his gambling addiction, and they're hard to read at times. In the progression of gambling disorder, some gamblers resort to illegal acts to finance gambling or to pay outstanding debts due to gambling. The National Library of Medicine has some extensive studies about the illegal behaviours as a consequence of a gambling disorder. One study cites that in those with illegal behaviours, the most common activities reported were writing bad cheques, paying bills from accounts that no longer had funds, and of course theft. In one account, Tony took money from his first wife's purse and then tried to convince his wife that she either lost it or she spent it earlier. And it's a form of gaslighting and manipulation that addicts frequently practice on those people who they most love. Now, you write about various such struggles, but it must have been very hard to navigate that journey.
Oh, it's horrible, yes. I felt very fortunate because our journey, gambling-wise, it was within our first year of marriage. It started to appear. And at the end of that year, practically, we went to Dianne Gamanon. So in those terms, when we went there were people who had been, families who'd been there, they'd been gambling till middle age and beyond without stopping, and the families were still with them in some cases. So yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible because you don't know, you mistrust yourself in the end. You think, am I imagining something? Because they'll tell you, and there's an urgency. There's always an urgency. It has to urgently be somewhere. Yes. That's it. I think that applies to any addict, doesn't it? It's always a rush.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of deception as to why they have to leave.
Yes. And also things start to fall apart. So that's another evidence,
Such as?
Well, in one case, he used to use a car in London. It's more common in the old days. But he wouldn't pay any, he just parked the car with a meter next to it.
Oh, so he didn't pay the meter?
Didn't pay the meters, didn't feed the meters at all. And eventually, and then one day I opened the glove box and there's a pile of them in there and questioned him about it, but then forgot about it again, we talked about it, and then one day...
So you're talking about parking tickets, I
Parking
presume.
tickets, yeah.
Right.
So just accumulated a pile of them. And one day we had a visit from a bailiff, which was horrible, which I describe in the book because it was horrible. And yes, and I just became more mistrustful. But each time he was so good at telling the stories that I'd end up feeling sorry for him and thinking, oh, yeah, how awful of me, because he's far too intelligent to gamble. He knows what the repercussions are. He wouldn't do that. But I had been the catalyst anyway.
In what sense?
For starting him gambling again. I did marry a man who wasn't gambling, but he had gambled, and a lot in the past. And he
Are you
told
saying
me...
he took up gambling after he married you again?
Yeah.
So why are you blaming yourself for that?
I'm not blaming myself. I'm saying I was a catalyst, inadvertently, because I didn't know anything about gambling. But, he's telling me. He told me one day, I described this scene. It's the first time we mentioned it. So, it's really relaxed. We're having a lovely Sunday, and there's coffee and croissants and papers and everything. And he told me about this big win that he'd had years ago. £30,000, which, I'm talking a long time ago, so it was quite a lot of money.
A great deal of money.
And so I sat up and thought, oh, wow, that's great. How exciting. Can you win money like that? Isn't that wonderful? So I said, and after a bit more talking about this, I said, well, I've got a little bit of savings. If I give you 50 quid, can you turn this into gold for us? So, he went off and gambled with that. And so that would have started him off again.
I remember reading that bit in the book, and I was shouting at the book, don't do it!
There you go.
But of course, in your innocence, you didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about gambling, really. In The Gambler, I mean, I has anybody read, we talk later, but Dostoevsky wrote a book called The Gambler. I don't know if anybody's read it, but he wrote it in 3 weeks because he owed money, because he was a compulsive gambler himself. He owed money to an unpleasant publisher who was threatening to take all his royalties away for the rest of his work forever. While he was writing Crime and Punishment, in 3 weeks he wrote The Gambler, and it's very convincing, and it has a wonderful Dickensian character because he also liked Dickens. So there's this grandmama, and she's tough, and she's the one with the money, and everybody's waiting for her to die, and then she suddenly turns up in the casino. Well, not in the casino town. He's named the town Roulettenberg. And so everybody goes there to gamble, obviously.
Yeah.
And she turns up and she's very disparaging and very bossy and decries everything. And then she spends some money at the casino and then can't leave it.
Oh, so she becomes such...
Yeah.
So the critic becomes the addict.
Yes.
Well, that's how it works. That's the seduction of gambling. Now, oftentimes recovery doesn't focus on the act of gambling, but rather on the underlying issues that cause addiction. Tony comes to realize this with the help of Gamblers Anonymous and with your support, which was boosted by Gam-Anon, a fellowship of those affected by someone else's gambling problem. Now, studies have shown that chronic gamblers had higher levels of depressive symptoms, for example. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. And there's, a lot of... there's a lot of soul-searching. How did you find that experience? Was there a lot of soul-searching for you and Tony?
Do you mean afterwards? Yeah, afterwards, yes. Well, actually, I think Tony was very interested in his soul. We were both interested in our souls, because the idea of these fellowships is to let go. My message was to let go of the gambler, because you're powerless. You can't stop anybody else's actions. What you can do is something, you can protect yourself. You can learn things to do that can protect yourself. You don't have to be horrible to the gambler. Most of us have been pretty hideous. I'd been hideous. We've all tried all sorts of strategies and been like fishwives if we were women,
so
whatever the equivalent is. But it's very difficult. So it's just, you just learn strategies. There are strategies. It's based on wisdoms of all various religions from the past and all sorts of wisdoms, and they're very simple things that you can do, like just live through each day and the Serenity Prayer and things like that. So all of that helps, and just getting to know yourself more and trying to be kinder.
And is there an element of grief, so to speak, in the sense for the gambler, the grief would be the loss of the excitement of losing the excitement of gambling, and then there's the grief that is accompanied by shame, deep shame, because communities are very judgmental, families and friends are very judgmental. Shame,
definitely. Grief, I'm not sure. Well, of course, I think that Tony's first words when he told me later, his first meeting at GA, he said, well, I'll just use, I think he said it kind of openly in the group, that he'd just use you guys to get my willpower back, and then I'll be able to gamble sensibly. But it's not like that. You can't do that, actually. Because normal people can go and wherever you put your money, scratch cards, can go maybe and say they're going to buy 6 and they don't win. They win and they think, oh, great, and they'll take it away again. But if you're an addict, that's not enough. It's not enough.
No.
It's not even to do, I understand, with the winning and the losing. If you win, it's fantastic, but it's going to be more. You need more. You've got to keep putting it on because you're on a winning streak. Put it on again. And if you're losing, well, you might win the next, it just might be the next twirl of the wheel.
And that's the thing that gets me is that in Canada, I'm sure it's the same here, especially in amusement arcades on beaches where you get those penny machines or whatever you call them, where people are slotting money.
Slot machines.
Slot machines, there you go. Yeah, you see people who... they have to go to the bathroom.
Whole casino's full of those.
Yeah, they put their chair against the machine so that nobody uses that machine because they're somehow convinced that it's going to, hit the big time at some point, and we laugh about it, but really it's quite sad because that means that they're so in the grip of believing that this time it's going to be the big one. It's a kind of faith in a way.
Oh, faith.
I mean, excuse me for saying that, God,
yes.
But it is a kind of faith in a way. People who suffer from addiction often find themselves having to lie and reinvent themselves to conceal their activities. And obviously we've talked about how this puts an immense struggle on family and friends and on a relationship. But you weathered the storm together. Now, you've already answered some of these. I was going to ask you what were some of the techniques you used to help you find peace. You said taking each one day at a time, saying the Serenity Prayer. Those who aren't familiar with the Serenity Prayer, what is the Serenity Prayer?
Well, see, this is where we had a problem. This is why I'm glad Seamus isn't here, because we're quite secular. I had to explain to Seamus when I was asking if we could have the space in the church that I am agnostic and Tony was Jewish. So, and he was secular kind of Jew. And so we had struggled with saying God, because God has so many connotations to so many people, and we didn't really want to say it. And it's the first word of the Serenity Prayer. I will say it today, but we just sort of substitute something else or say it quietly. Anyway, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
That's beautiful. I really like the line, the wisdom to know the difference.
Well, it's the secret to everything, really, isn't it? So it's extremely useful for anybody in your life, I think. I think it's... Yeah.
And taking one day at a time. I mean, I'm somebody who has an illness, as you know. I'm on dialysis and I have cancer, and so
you're an inspiration to us all.
but the taking the one day at a time is really important to me because I never know where I'm going to be at any time. So I can see how addiction would tie into that as well. One day at a time is so important. You write warmly about the community of friends that you and Tony made at GAM Anon. And Tony discovered at Gamblers Anonymous. GAM Anon and GA meetings are usually held on the same nights, but in separate rooms. What is said in each room is kept confidential, so that members in both rooms don't need to worry about sharing their problems or concerns. The members of these groups have been there, so they really understand your predicament. They share their own stories, and they listen and empathize with your journey. Now, you're made to feel supported, and most importantly, that you're not alone. As well as being comforting and reassuring, was there an element of shock realizing how much your experiences had in common with other GAM Anon members?
Oh, a surprise, certainly, yes, because despite the fact I said that I felt almost like a fraud because I'd only been suffering for relatively months and they had been for years, and they had... but yes, it was a shock to understand that I'd married somebody who had these features, like a bit of a loser. If you're a compulsive gambler, you're a loser, right? If you're an addict, you're a loser, unless you do something about it, and a lot of people don't. So I felt like a loser too, because I had chosen my one with a flaw. And so I have to understand that it's not my fault, and it's nothing to do with me, and to let him get on with his recovery, and I had to get on with mine. And a lot of my recovery is to kind of try and trust him again. And one of the things we used to say in GAM Anon is, don't interrogate because, of course, one, in a normal relationship, one asks questions of one's partner and so on, and normal. But interrogation, it's kind of like you kind of, you know the sort of thing I would be asking, have you been gambling, for instance? Because if you're asking a compulsive gambler who is recovering and in recovery, if he's gambling, then you're not going to win, are you? Because if he is trying really hard and he's not gambling, he'll be hurt. If he is gambling, he'll lie to you.